On an overcast spring day in 2019, I left the Bridge to Nowhere trailhead and hiked the mile to the first river crossing. By then, I'd been on this trail about 20 times and knew every usual crossing by heart. I'd seen them in low water and in high water, and I understood how dramatically the river could change from one visit to the next. When I arrived at the crossing, several hikers were standing at the river's edge, staring at the high water. No one was crossing. They told me they were hesitant because the water was both fast and high. I observed the water level myself. It was higher than I'd ever seen it. Well, only a little higher. I judged it to be at a level I could handle. I normally crossed with the assistance of one trekking pole. This time, with the extra depth and speed, I decided to use two for added stability. It seemed like the safer choice. I told the other hikers I intended to cross, because I knew others might follow if I succeeded, and concerned that they would not know what to do if they were swept downstream. I explained the risk and described the defensive swimming position. Body supine, feet together and pointing downstream, knees slightly bent to absorb any impacts, head up looking downstream, hands at your sides. This position protects your head and gives you better control if you're swept away. I looped my hands through the wrist straps on my poles and stepped into the cold, swift water. As I moved into deeper water, I found each pole difficult to control using only one hand. Then, when I planted them on the river bottom, they began to vibrate, which bothered me. As I went farther into the river and entered the critical point, that is the deepest, fastest part of the crossing, the vibration became so violent it threw me off balance. This vibration in the poles was caused by hydroelastic flutter. As moving water flowed across the poles, it triggered oscillations in the structure. Exactly the same principle shown in physics classes using the famous 1940 Tacoma Narrows bridge footage. In that case, strong wind moving over the bridge deck induced flutter that drove the roadway to twist violently up and down. This broke down the bridge's structural integrity. Until it finally collapsed. Fortunately, no one died in that incident. Wind or water moving across the structure can induce this same type of flutter. When it is caused by air movement, it is known as aeroelastic flutter. When it is caused by water movement, it is called hydroelastic flutter. In my case, the flutter was caused by river water. To demonstrate this phenomenon, I placed a trekking pole into 30 inches of fast-moving water. You can see the pole vibrating. This vibration travels straight up into my hands. On that day in 2019, as I moved into deeper, faster water, the vibration intensified, destabilizing me at the worst possible moment. With my feet slipping, I realized I needed to get into the defensive swimming position. Just before my feet lost contact with the river bottom, I pivoted hard on one foot, twisted my body to the left, and hurled myself backward into the churning water. The maneuver worked. I was immediately in the correct position, head upstream and feet downstream. I let go of my poles and used my hands to paddle sideways, working myself out of the strongest part of the current toward the bank where I needed to exit. As I neared my exit point, I rolled into a prone position and swam for shore. Within a few strokes, my hand hit the river bottom. I planted my hands and feet, stopping my downstream movement, and crawled onto the riverbank. My adrenaline was surging. I sat for a moment, breathing deeply, letting myself settle down. In that brief sequence, there were two actions that significantly improved my safety. Actions I have not seen addressed elsewhere. First, when I realized I was going to be swept downstream, I twisted into the defensive swimming position before losing contact with the ground. This put me in the proper position before the current started moving me downstream. If I had waited for the river to knock me off my feet, I might have ended up going downstream headfirst or sideways, giving the river the opportunity to drive my head into a rock. I don't want the river deciding my fate if I can avoid it. By getting into that position early, I protected my head as the current took me downstream. Second, I used my hands to paddle sideways out of the strongest part of the current. In a medium-sized mountain river like the San Gabriel, the fastest water is usually only a few feet wide. Moving just those few feet over slowed my downstream travel and brought me closer to the riverbank. Once I reached an exit point, I could get out quickly. One caution: I won't always paddle sideways immediately. At one particular crossing point, there's a rock hazard downstream, so my plan there was to stay in the main current long enough to clear the rock, then paddle sideways toward an exit point. The key is intentionality. Know the hazards, know your plan, and act deliberately. After resting, I decided I'd had enough adventure for the day and would head back to my car. But there was a problem. I'd crossed the river, and to get back, I needed to cross it again. One trekking pole was gone, and the other was still attached to my wrist. So, to get back across, I returned to the same place where I had been swept away. At this point in the story, we'll go down to the river where I can explain what I did.
If you hold it like a canoe paddle, one hand on top, one down here, you can control it much better in the water. Because if you are just trying to control it like this, it's very hard to move, get it to go where you want it. But this way, you can control it. And when you put your hand down, look at this. No vibration up here. Little bit, but not. When you do this, it just stops it. And the reason is, when you put your hand down here, it shortens the wavelength of the vibration. And so the intensity is much less. And then this hand blocks the vibration from going further up the pole, so you have very little vibration, doesn't throw you off balance. So going back, I just use one trekking pole. You walk along using the trekking pole as a third leg, and it works very well. So rule is, to cross in a river, swift current, 2 trekking poles will get you into trouble. Just use one, hold it like a canoe paddle.
Using only one trekking pole, I crossed back over the river easily and without incident. For the record, I used a carbon fiber trekking pole during the crossing. I haven't yet river-tested poles made from other materials, such as aluminum and hardwoods. My expectation is that a stiffer pole would show less flutter. I recently asked AI through Google the question, when crossing a deep, swift river, should you use one trekking pole or 2? As you see here, it answered, you should use 2 trekking poles, adding that using 2 poles allows for a safer, more controlled crossing compared to a single pole. This sounds reasonable, but as we know, it's wrong. AI clearly isn't familiar with fluttering trekking poles. This isn't the first time I've asked AI a hiking question and received an answer that appeared to make perfect sense, yet contradicted real-world experience. I don't think I'm the only hiker who has had fluttering trekking poles disrupt a river crossing. If this phenomenon has ever caused you trouble, tell us about it in the comments. And if you've asked AI a hiking question and the answer contradicted your real-world experience, share that in the comments as well. To make the matter clear, using 2 trekking poles to cross in shallower or slower-moving water is not a problem. The flow isn't strong enough to excite significant vibration in the poles, and the added stability can help maintain balance. Thanks for joining me today. If you learned something new, hit the like button and share this video with someone you'd want on the trail beside you. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you on our next adventure.